Welcome to the Plant Fit Summit, bringing you the best in plant-based health and fitness. This is Luke and Toby, and today we have Nikki Bravata. Nikki is a registered nurse with more than 13 years of nursing experience in intensive care and integrative oncology. She has spent 8 years training and practicing in alternative therapies for healing from chronic diseases. Nikki's experience working with patients healing from cancer has fueled her passion for preventative lifestyle modification. We start the conversation with Nikki sharing about how we are exposed to toxic chemicals. Enjoy the presentation.
Definitely the things that we're putting into our body in terms of our, what we're eating is a big source. I would say probably that's the majority of it. But sometimes we might not recognize that maybe the city that we're living in, there can be, maybe some pollution in the air that we breathe here. We live in Phuket, and a lot of people are riding motorbikes, for example, and so they're getting maybe a lot of exhaust fumes or even like brake dust and those types of things, and so we're inhaling certain pollution. And then also like in our body products, I think that's another one that we maybe just kind of go through the day, especially women. Gosh, we put tons of chemicals on our body between our makeup, our lotions, our perfume sprays. And then even like as you're just taking a sip of water, sometimes even depending on where you're getting your water from, those can also be a source of toxins. And then of course, like even like the byproducts of things that we have that we break down can create like endotoxins in the body. And so we kind of can produce some of our own depending on how the types of foods that we're having and how they affect our body. And then of course we have to, we have to mention the big obvious things like alcohol, smoking, drugs. These types of things are also, no matter in how much we, I think this is a big one. Most people like to have, a drink on the weekend or something like that. But I have to always remind my patients that, it's always a toxin in our body. People say, but we can get the antioxidants, but we can get those from fruits, vegetables, other types of, sources for antioxidants. Or, it helps me relax. Well, we can learn some meditation or something like that. So there's always another option for using a substance to, maybe give us an antioxidant or relaxation. So those are, I would say, probably are the top sources for toxins.
So I want to kind of pick up on particularly nutrition being the Plant Fit Summit. So when nutrition is concerned, what are some of the major sources of toxins?
I actually like to have this conversation with people because when actually a big part of my job is looking into what kind of toxins people are getting exposed to in their lifestyle. And when we look at, say, heavy metals, of course, a lot of heavy metals and even like toxins come from the soil, and they're in, say, our fruits and vegetables that we're eating. If we're not choosing like maybe some really good organic sources, unfortunately, it's just been the use of, pesticides and things like this over the years that have kind of contaminated the soils. And so a lot of people say to me like, well, then I guess I shouldn't eat fruits and vegetables. But we have to remember too that when we're eating animal proteins, animal still has its snout into soil too, and just like we accumulate and will store toxins in our tissues, the animal does too. And that's the same for fish. So a lot of people will say like, I don't eat, land animals, I don't eat chickens, and I don't eat, pork and cow, whatever. But the same thing with fish. Unfortunately, our fish are loaded with toxins as well, and they accumulate in their body. So when we have those animal proteins, we're having a really concentrated source of these chemicals as well. So I always take people back to remember that it's actually the fruits and vegetables that contain fiber, which is the key ingredient, the key thing that helps us to detoxify from those toxins. So it acts like a sponge in our digestive system. So the idea is really not to avoid, say, fruits and vegetables, but maybe try to choose a better source if you can. I know it's difficult, and especially here in Thailand, there's some odd 1,800 registered chemicals that are safe for human consumption. It's loaded, and there's not a lot of regulation too in how much they're used. And so even some of these things can just be really, like our fruits and vegetables can be loaded with toxins. So trying to choose an organic source would be number one. I would say that the first rule to detox is stop intoxicating. Try to avoid it for sure. And if you can't find organic, that doesn't mean like don't have the fruits or vegetables, have it, because again, it's going to provide you with the fiber. So if you were to compare, say, one diet to another, I definitely am a huge fan of just trying to increase the amount of fruits and vegetables that you're having in your diet, maybe legumes, these types of things, because again, they contain the fiber that's going to clear those toxins from your body.
You mentioned safe toxins for consumption. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit more.
Maybe some of them aren't as harmful as others, especially if we, go into, say, heavy metals. I'll give you an example of that one, because I think it's one that maybe we don't really think about as much. I mean, maybe, we know that in our environment, we're maybe exposed to, like, we should avoid plastic bottles, for example, or we shouldn't breathe in the, polluted air. We kind of know these things already, but one of the ones that I think surprises people a lot is toxins like heavy metals, because we just don't know like where they come from and what effects do they have in the body. But not all of those metals are going to really have like a more toxic effect on the body. So when we talk about the more toxic forms of heavy metals, we're talking about maybe aluminum, mercury, cadmium, lead. These ones have more of an effect on the body. So if we say like safe chemicals, I mean, anything that's a chemical probably isn't like really safe, because it can maybe over time cause more problems, but our body can handle a lot, right? I mean, we can get away with smoking, we can get away with drinking, we can process a ton of chemicals, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be functioning optimally. So if you really want to try to have a healthier lifestyle, avoid the contribution that maybe some of these toxins make to disease, the idea, like I said, would be to try to avoid them in the first place. So maybe just, becoming more aware of where you're getting these toxins from and which ones maybe are more harmful than others, because it's impossible. It's impossible to avoid toxins. I mean, we're born with them. We get heavy metals from our moms. We pass them down in childbirth. Now the recommendation for women that are of thinking about having a child is to avoid fish for 5 years because of the toxins that are loaded in fish. I mean, so this tells you that it's just we're living in this majorly toxic environment. So I love like listening to Dr. Vivian Chen. She's on your summit. She's one of my favorite. I follow her Instagram because she really exposes where do we get these chemicals from. And it is so surprising to me sometimes, like things that we just do every day that we don't really think about. So I think it's just about becoming aware of where these things are coming from, which ones are the most harmful, like the big obvious ones that maybe we can try to avoid. Like if you have the choice of plastic or glass, drink your water out of glass. And if it's like or bottled water that maybe is more acidic, or it has the more harmful plastic, then maybe choose a harder plastic bottle, or drink filtered water from home or something like that, rather than constantly buying plastic bottles. So I think just becoming aware of where these things are coming from and trying to avoid them is incredibly important over time for your health.
So speaking of awareness, you mentioned lead, cadmium, aluminum, and of course mercury as well. And my understanding is that a lot of these heavy metals are based on what you shared as well from fish. So beyond fish, where are some sources of heavy metals in our food system?
In our food, definitely in the soil. I mean, again, like the use of pesticides, over time, these things can accumulate, but also like we have to consider our cookware. So I see a lot of elevated aluminum, and people probably, well, especially here in Thailand too, where they eat a lot of street food and they're maybe not using cookware that's as good quality. So you could use maybe glass or stainless steel or something like that. Also, like drinking from aluminum cans. Deodorant is another big one. Aluminum is like the main ingredient in deodorant that stops us from sweating. And the effect of aluminum, unfortunately, is that it can have more effect on your cognitive function. So it's actually a risk factor for Alzheimer's in increased aluminum in the body. So again, this is just about trying to avoid that exposure. Even myself, when I first came to Thailand, I had always used natural deodorant. I worked in cancer, care for many years. And so I knew that like I should be using natural deodorant. But when I came to Thailand, I was just sweating a lot. It's hot here. And so I started using regular deodorant again. And of course, when I compared my heavy metals to, before and just maybe about a year or two of use of aluminum, my aluminum levels had increased pretty significantly. And now I've avoided that again, gone back to like a rock salt, or like the ones that don't contain aluminum, and my aluminum has come down. So that's a good news, that we can actually help to control these things in our body just by avoiding them. Maybe we talk a lot about detox as something that we're doing, but a detox is actually just happening. And the best way to help our body to detoxify is just by avoiding those things in the first place. And that's just aluminum.
I definitely want to get into detoxification a little bit later. So you brought up pans and deodorants. So for me, and I know of many people who, especially who cook oil-free, SOS-free, they might use a non-stick pan. So what is the impact of using things like a non-stick pan, or you mentioned street food, and I know they may use cast iron pans as well. Not sure what kind of cookware they use. So how can people, or what can people look out for with cookware?
Trying to do it at home, is the best thing. I mean, we're going to eat out, we're going to eat at restaurants. So, maybe it's the same as like when you go out to a restaurant and you have a glass of wine, or you have something. I mean, we're human, we're going to, or you're going to have dessert that day or something, you're going to have more sugar or something. But when you're at home, this is like your one safe place. I always tell this to people that are maybe raising vegan kids too, or trying to follow a plant-based lifestyle. This is the place that is like your safe place. So maybe when you're choosing cookware, try to maybe avoid the ones with the nonstick, the Teflon coating, that can be another source of toxin, or try to choose something like glass cookware or a higher quality cookware, because you're going to limit your exposure over time. Even aluminum foil. I just had somebody just the other day that came in and she said, I cook everything on aluminum foil. So maybe just cooking in the glass pan, rather than, and I know it's like you want to cover it, I'm not much of a big cook. I'm not the best at cooking myself, so I don't really use really sophisticated techniques for cooking, but I think becoming aware of, those things. Maybe don't put things in the microwave, for example, and definitely not with plastic. Plastics are another source. We store our foods in plastic. So I would suggest just maybe switching to glass containers. And I like what Vivian Chen says a lot in when she's telling people about making this change. It doesn't have to happen overnight, so maybe if it's time to replace your cookware or something, that's when you can consider doing something different. Or if you're next time you run out of aluminum foil, just maybe don't buy it again, or avoid the plastic wrap, or change what you're storing your foods into glass or something like that. And just little things like that over time will help to reduce your exposure.
Well, thank you for that, because I think I need to scale back on the aluminum foil, because sometimes we cook with it and just kind of layer it on top because the recipe says so.
Yeah.
So I might use parchment paper. Would parchment paper be okay?
Yeah, parchment paper, sure. Like, and yeah, you can use that, instead of, I mean, again, like, I'm not a huge cook, so I don't know about the different like cooking methods, of course. But yeah, I think parchment paper would be probably a good substitute for certain things.
Where heavy metal toxicity is concerned, how would someone know that they're suffering from it?
It can be really tough to know, like if you're having symptoms. Actually, until you really accumulate quite a bit of metals, you might not notice the real severe side effects, like the brain fog that comes with aluminum, or maybe like neuropathies, like the tingling in the fingers or something like that. That can be a source. But I think probably the more common thing that happens when we accumulate heavy metals in the body is that the problem with them is that they'll block the receptors where minerals should go. And so when we have low minerals, we can absorb more toxins like heavy metals. And then when we get heavy metals, they will block how we can absorb our minerals. And that is where the kind of unknown effect comes from. I'll make an example. When you have high cadmium, for example, cadmium may come definitely in the soil, but it's in cigarette smoke and it's in secondhand smoke. That's probably the major source of cadmium. But when you accumulate a lot of cadmium in the body, then it can block how you absorb zinc. And zinc is essential for a man, for example, to produce testosterone. It's also essential for our immune system too. And so it's common that when we see people that have high cadmium in the body, they'll have low levels of zinc. The other one with aluminum is silicon. So when you have high aluminum in the body, you may have low silicone, and silicone's great for your hair, skin, and nails. It's good for your joints. Lead, for example, can block, magnesium, calcium, these types of minerals. And so I think that that's probably the more profound effect that we should be definitely aware of, because we need these minerals critically. Mercury is another example. This is one that I can say I've experienced even myself. When I was in my early 30s, I went to have all of my mercury amalgams removed at my dentist, who just drilled straight into them. And I didn't know at that time that I should have had them removed probably by a holistic dentist, who will be very careful to isolate that area and evacuate the fumes in a way that you don't get an exposure. And so after that happened, what I experienced for the first time in my life was hypothyroid and low thyroid function, because mercury will block the absorption of iodine. And iodine is critical for the function of our thyroid. And so when we have low iodine, by the way, naturally in foods is coming in like sea vegetables, so you have to eat a lot of seaweed to get enough iodine. Most people can become deficient iodines where they iodize salt, for example, because many people were so deficient in iodine, they were developing goiters. And so they started to develop, started to iodize salt. So that's another source maybe where people get some iodine. But iodine, because it's so critical for the thyroid, is something that I think that goes really underlooked when so many people are dealing with hypothyroid, which can stem from other issues, like maybe some issues in the gut, or stress. Definitely cortisol will do that. It starts to maybe utilize our other hormones like our thyroid and sex hormones. And so you might see alteration there, but we should not overlook the effect that maybe low iodine has in the function of the thyroid. The problem is our thyroid, the receptors might get filled with things like fluoride, chloride, and bromide, which comes in drinking water, right? Fluoride, chloride, our toothpaste, even. So we have to consider like the products we're even brushing our teeth with to avoid something like fluoride. And then bromide is in baked goods. So, and also in baked goods is aluminum in baking powder. So you can maybe buy, if you're baking at home, maybe buy aluminum-free baking powder. But the bromide that we get from when we eat cakes, cookies, muffins, these types of things, they can fill those receptors on the thyroid. And so maybe someone looks like, we do their blood tests and it looks like maybe those numbers are okay. There's a broad range for thyroid, by the way. So maybe it's not optimal, but it might still show up in the normal range. But we see people that come in and they're like, oh man, I'm tired, I can't get up in the morning, I can't lose weight, my hair is falling out, I have temperature sensitivity, I feel cold all the time. This is all related to the function of this little mighty gland, the thyroid, and so the thyroid controls our metabolism in our body. And so it's definitely a good idea to consider these sources of toxins and how they affect the hormone productions in our body. That all those little chemical reactions that are happening in the body, heavy metals will impact that. So maybe, how we absorb our nutrients in our body needs to be considered as well.
You mentioned iodine. So how much of the population, based on your experience, is deficient in iodine? And do people need to supplement with it? Because, not many people have seaweed as part of their diet, maybe Japanese. Even myself, every now and then we might use some Dow's flakes. We don't use iodized salt. We use sea salt, Himalayan sea salt. So from my understanding, that doesn't contain iodine. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, good question. So I would suggest, I'd like to say, know the value of your values, so get a test. It's easy to maybe have, a comprehensive test for when they test heavy metals, typically it will be tested with, the mineral levels, same with your thyroid levels, same with your hormone levels. Know where you're at before you start any type of supplement. And maybe besides vitamin C, which I think probably all of us could benefit from, I really think it's really beneficial to know if you need something before you start taking it. I mean, I will have, in the past, I had a fun hobby of, right here in Thailand, it can be difficult to find, good sources of supplements. So in my free time, I would peruse iHerb and just order things that I thought that I needed. And I learned that maybe that's not the best way to go about, of treating yourself is actually just know where you're at, because you can really become, I believe that supplements can be helpful. Sometimes when you're maybe eating the same types of foods, you're not getting enough variety, or maybe you have some digestive issues, so you're maybe not absorbing enough of a certain, vitamin or mineral, or you're training really hard, or I mean, there's so many things that can contribute to where you can develop some deficiencies. It's not just because you're plant-based, or you're not, your diet hasn't been that great or something, but it's true that we need to eat a variety. But how do we know really what we need is just by finding out. There's so many amazing tests that are available. If you talk to, maybe go see your, I would suggest a functional medicine doctor who maybe might understand a little bit more in depth about the value of having correct vitamin and mineral levels in your body, and really how to understand the value of hormones and these types of things. So start there, start to see the doctor, especially if you're feeling symptomatic. How easy is it for us to just brush off symptoms? It's like we kind of normalize, having the bloating, gas, like, the cramping in the stomach sometimes, headaches. Fatigue is probably the biggest one, where people feel like, oh, I'm just tired, but that's normal. I stayed up late last night, or I worked really hard, or this type of thing. But I think we should really be feeling vibrant. We should be feeling energetic, and be able to make it throughout the day without feeling like we need to just totally take a nap, or, we don't have enough energy for our jobs or our kids or something like that. So find out what's behind those symptoms, I think is probably the most beneficial thing that someone can do as a place to start, because I can't really estimate how much of the population really has iodine deficiency. I would say it's really common in the patients that I see. I look at lab values and heavy metal results on a lot of our guests, food intolerance results. I mean, some of these things are pretty common. Some people, we end up with the same things. We're all subject to the same rules as humans. So we have a lot of similar things, but we're so individual. So that's where this approach of like one size fits all detox, for example, just doesn't work, because we are so different, and we have so many maybe genetic variants. I mean, even though that's a small part, but different. We live in different places. We're from different cultures, so we like different things. Maybe if you're Italian, you're used to eating pasta and pizza, or maybe if you're Asian, you're here in Asia, everybody likes to eat rice and curries. So we maybe are having more of the same foods and exposures, and maybe you're living in a big city. So everybody's different in terms of where they're at. So I can't encourage people enough to just start with finding out, where are you and where do you want to be? What is your goal? Because if you're thinking about maybe doing a detox, for example, why are you doing a detox? Is it because you've been, maybe having too much alcohol, and that, okay, this is like getting toxic in my lifestyle? Is it because you need to do it therapeutically? Maybe you've just been diagnosed with cancer, or you're on a healing journey of cancer, or you're, diabetic or something like this, or most of the times it's just that we feel toxic, right? Like we get this point where we're like, ugh, like I just feel gross. Like my digestion feels gross. Like I don't have energy. Maybe like skin, issues come up, a lot of acne or that type of thing. So knowing like what is your goal? Why are you doing this? And where are you now before you embark on a journey of healing is incredibly important.
I think that's so important to just understand where you are now. And you brought up such a great point about getting some tests, because we can get lost in the supplement world. You go to iHerb, oh, I need B12, I need B6, I need omega-3s, I'm a performance, I need creatine. And next thing you know, you open your cupboard, you're just full of A to zinc of supplements without really addressing what you actually need. So that's a really good point there. And I think this is a great segue for detox. I'd love to get your take on, what detoxification is for people who don't understand, and how does the body actually do it?
Yeah, great question. Actually, this has been kind of a journey for me too. So I'll share in parts about detox for myself too, because as a nurse, I'm, worked in intensive care for years, 5 years before setting out to Arizona, where I started working in an integrative oncology practice called Oasis of Healing. It's a great oncology practice still there. And so detox was a huge part of the program. I mean, that was like the first thing that we would do. And Luke, personally, with what your situation with your brother this year, when something like, you get diagnosed with cancer, it's like, it's now. That's one of the things I liked about working with cancer patients, is that we stop negotiating. I think for most of us, when we're feeling well, and the majority of the patients I see now in the center that I work at, it's like we're well. So we're kind of negotiate like, oh, well, can I do this on the weekends? Can I do this on Fridays? Can I do this much? How about this much? We kind of go back and forth about what can we get away with, but when you're diagnosed with cancer, it's again, one of those examples I made about a therapeutic reason to do something like detox or fasting, because it's a need to. And so my experience was always that, we would just kind of put everybody, well, and as long as they weren't too underweight, for example, into straight away like a green juice detox to kind of help alkalize the body, to shut down the digestion, because fasting is incredibly helpful. If you look at some of the research now behind fasting, my goodness, you'll want to do it all the time, because it's the fastest way to reduce inflammation in the body, to heal the gut, to improve the production even of certain hormones, of course, too. A lot of people are using intermittent fasting. This is a great approach to someone that maybe needs to reduce visceral fat, improve their insulin sensitivity. These types of things are incredibly useful, of course. But in the situation where I'm in now, where I see patients that maybe are kind of dealing with things more like stress, not that a cancer patient is not dealing with stress, of course they are, but maybe they've been stressed for a long period of time. I see more that, or weight loss. I see a lot of people for weight loss. And this is where I think detox needs to be approached carefully, because I think it's really common for people to want to use detox as a way to control maybe their body weight. And I think this is where you can probably run into some issues. And I'll share with you a little bit of my personal story, which was that when I worked in the cancer program, I was constantly doing fasting. And at the time, I really felt like, oh, this is really good. And I actually felt great when I was fasting. So I loved doing it. Sometimes my patient would be starting a green juice fast, and I'd say, oh, I'll do it with you. But over the course of 10 years and continuing to fast, so many times, I kind of knew that that was a way that I could control my body weight. And I knew that if I did a fast for 5 days or 10 days or something, I could lose 5 to 10 pounds, and that was pretty alluring to me when I was younger. And I was really trying to fit into this mold of being skinny. I really thought that was like my ultimate goal, was to try to be thin and, control my body weight. But the problem is, over time, when you restrict your foods for so long, that we talked about what good nutrition brings. It brings vitamins, minerals, fiber, antioxidants, polyphenols, all these great things that our body needs for our cells to be functioning normally. So when we restrict ourselves of those so much, and we're undernourishing our body, we can get into as much trouble with our health as someone that's maybe overdoing it, overnourishing, overeating. I saw a lot of patients actually in the cancer program that were anorexic, that maybe wouldn't eat enough. And of course, we have to remember that what we get in the nutrition, as I said before, this is critical to the function of our cells and our body. So, and not to mention our gut health. So when we restrict fiber, for example, if we're not eating enough and we're not getting enough fiber, this is probably what's behind a lot of the problem with diets like maybe the keto or some carnivore diet and these types of things, where maybe you're restricting fiber. It can really, change the microbiome in the gut, which we need actually to help us even with weight loss, or for the function of our immune system, for example. The gut is so important for immune function. I'm sure you'll hear a lot about this in the other sessions from our gut health doctors that are so well versed on these things. So when a period of stress came in my life, and I had been restricting for so long and underweight for so long, and that stress came, what happened was the combination of undernourishing and overstressing led me to a giant hormone imbalance. And I was in my early 30s when this happened. And it took, more than 3 years to get back to balance. And the reason for that is because, again, we need these things to produce our hormones. We need to rest, we need to work out, exercise, and we need to nourish our body for the correct production of all the processes, the biochemical processes that happen in the body, the function of the gut, for example. So I really try to, again, look at the person to find out, what are you doing a detox for? What is your purpose? Is it, if it's because you've been, maybe overdoing it with alcohol, or definitely maybe you haven't been really careful about your exposure to certain things, then a great place to start detox is to stop intoxicating. That's the number one rule. So maybe be very careful for a while about the source of food that you're having. There was a study that they did on a family where they had 2 weeks of organic food, and they measured the levels of chemicals in the body before and after. And just 2 weeks on strictly organic food, the levels of chemicals, especially in the kids and of course the adults, dropped significantly. So that tells us that just by avoiding those things. So this is something that we can do every day. And when we talk about detox, it's not necessarily something that we're doing, it's happening. Our body is detoxifying every day, every moment. Actually, it's this incredible healing machine. Now, of course, yes, we get bombarded with toxins, but if we get out of the way and allow ourselves, get rid of some of these exposures, then our body's going to have a lot easier time to detoxify. Now, of course, there's things that you can do to support. Like I said, I'm definitely a fan of supporting with certain supplements. There's maybe certain genetic reasons why someone might not detoxify as well as somebody else. Like if they have a MTHFR defect or something like that, then maybe they need to have some methylfolate or something like that to help, with those processes in the liver. Or maybe there's certain, viral components or bacterias in the body that maybe someone needs to deal with first, or concurrently as they're doing some type of detox that will help the body to detoxify better. Another thing that helps us to detoxify really well is getting good sleep and not eating before we go to bed. Is when we're sleeping is when our body is doing all of that incredible cleanup. And the reason for that is because during that time we're fasting. So this is a great time that, maybe you can extend your fast. This is the benefit of intermittent fasting. So maybe this method would work better for you over time than like restricting altogether. Or doing a prolonged fast on, say, juice or water or something like that. I mean, let's face it, if you're working and you need to function, maybe a water fast is going to be incredibly difficult for you. This is a time to like completely slow down. And it can be very beneficial, of course, therapeutically for a lot of cases like cancer, for example. Water fasting can be really, really helpful. Or in diabetes, for example, maybe some method of fasting is going to help over time as well. So again, sleep is the time that our body is repairing, rejuvenating, right? So the idea here would be to try to avoid eating before you go to sleep. Because if you're spending those first few hours of the time that you're supposed to be repairing, digesting, then you're not going to be repairing as efficiently as you would as if maybe you avoided having something to digest maybe 3 hours before you go to sleep. So that when you do finally hit the pillow, which should be maybe around 10 p.m. And maybe 8 hours uninterrupted, that would really help the detoxification efforts.
Eating before bed, I think of the hawker centers in Singapore. They get packed at 10 p.m. and they sell things like fried chicken and curries and curry fish head. I used to do that. I can't imagine just digesting something like that at 10, 11 p.m. So would you suggest like at least 2 to 3 hours? What's the kind of time frame for people to stop eating?
Yeah, probably 2 to 3 hours would be sufficient, depending on, what you're having as well. If you're having a big meal like that, maybe 3 hours for sure, but if you're having something light, things that are going to digest really easily are things like vegetables and salads and, maybe some fruits or soups or something like that are a nice dinner because they're light. And you'll feel the difference, if you go to sleep on an empty stomach, you'll actually wake up feeling more fresh because your body has done that repair work. And we know if we don't sleep enough hours, I think sleep probably is like the number one factor for our health, because how is it when you don't sleep? Everyone knows you feel grumpy the next day. You know, you're definitely, maybe you skip your exercise, or you're definitely not going to repair as well. Sleep and rest is, we know, is an incredibly important part of fitness, is that repair. You know, your relationships might suffer because you're more grumpy. You definitely, like, sometimes when you don't eat, when you don't sleep as well, you eat badly the next day. You don't, you know, your the hormones that are controlling your hunger are even, you know, are altered, and so you might not make the best choices around food the next day. So if you can get your sleep right, and you know, and this is tough because I meet people all the time that have an incredibly difficult time sleeping, and that one can be really tough to solve. I actually feel really I feel sorry for people that have difficult time sleeping really well, because if you've ever had insomnia for a long period of time, like, it really can mess with you. You know, it really can make you feel pretty bad. But it's such an important part of our health to get right. So if you're really having difficult time sleeping, I think it's really important to maybe, you know, talk to the doctor about it. See, you know, again, a functional medicine doctor who can really start to understand what is impacting your sleep. You know, is it because maybe you're stressed, and maybe you're, you know, you're inappropriately secreting the hormone cortisol, you know, something like that. Maybe it's peaking at night, for example, and that might mean that you need to check your cortisol levels throughout the day. Is it because maybe you're, you know, maybe not sleeping in the right environment? Our sleep environment is also really important. The room should be very dark, so we secrete more melatonin. Melatonin is an incredible helpful antioxidant for sleep. I think that people can really benefit from taking melatonin. It has very potent anti-cancer properties to it as well, not in addition to helping you sleep. And also your room should be cool, you know, so it maybe if the temperature is too warm, you're not going to get as good of restful sleep as you would be getting. And oh, let's not forget alcohol. This is another one that I think a lot of people will say, like, well, alcohol, if I have a glass of wine or you know, some beer or something before I go to sleep, then it helps me sleep. But the opposite is actually true. Alcohol fragments your sleep no matter how you slice it or dice it. It actually does not help you get into those deeper levels of sleep as well. So avoiding alcohol, and then of course, like I said, just food. You know, so when your body is digesting, you know, you're probably not going to be getting all the benefits of sleep as well. So I think that optimizing your sleep is probably, you know, number one for your health, and getting that straight. And that's really like when we're doing the most important cleanup, going back to detox. This is really when our body is resting, repairing, and rejuvenating, when we're, you know, making a lot of our hormones in our sleep too. So when you're missing out on that, or you're going to sleep too late, you're going to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, for example, and maybe sleeping till 6, you might be missing out and altering your level of hormones over time too, that are essential for your weight loss, for your recovery, for keeping you young. You know, this is like the difference between, like, hormones. They matter for everything in our bodies. The difference between a 15-year-old and a 50-year-old, right? Like, when hormones, they keep us young.
I want to just kind of zip back a little bit to just the fasting aspect,
Yeah.
just to kind of tie a loop on that. So where fasting is concerned, I know there are tremendous benefits for fasting. And I personally practice time restricted eating. But when should a person not consider fasting?
I think this is really important to understand kind of yourself firstly, before, you know, and kind of why you want to do fasting before jumping into it. Because I think in certain cases, you know, probably someone that might be dealing with disordered eating, might not really, it might not be the best thing for you to try fasting, uh, unless maybe you really have like a real reason for, you know, detoxification or something, like I said, therapeutically, that maybe the gut is altered or something like that. I mean, in any gut situation, fasting can be really beneficial because it'll help reduce inflammation, and it'll help to repair, you know, all the way the entire digestive system quickly. But if it's somebody that's maybe you're doing it as a way to restrict your weight, restrict your calories, or, you know, something like that, I think it's better to think about how you can nourish yourself more regularly. Because again, falling into that trap of continuing to fast to reduce your weight can actually destroy your hormones over time. And not only that, but again, it can wreak havoc on your gut health too, because you're not getting fiber, you know. And so if you are not giving your body enough fiber over time, then you may do more harm than good to the health of the microbiome in the gut. So maybe if you want to do some type of detoxification, maybe like raw foods or something like this, like of course, a plant-based, switching from a regular diet to a plant-based lifestyle is detoxifying for somebody, because you're just, again, you're not getting a concentrated source of those toxins that maybe come along with eating high amounts of animal proteins, dairies, cheeses, these types of things that we know will contribute to disease in the body. So that already might be a detox for you, and you might feel symptoms of detox, like you might feel a little bit worse before you feel better. I think that's the problem when some people switch to a plant-based diet. They're like, I didn't feel good. Well, of course, like your body's going through a big shift, and so sometimes detox doesn't really feel good. You might feel fatigued, you might have nausea, you might get headaches. And that may be because you're not eliminating the toxins as well. So detox is really important for you to eliminate properly. So going to the toilet, drinking lots of water, moving your bowels is especially important during detoxification. Another situation where someone might want to be really careful about the type of detox that they choose would be somebody that has adrenal fatigue. So this goes back, I can share my personal experience with this one as well. And I will tell you what happened when I tried finally after the hormone imbalance, when I was very underweight from restricting for so long, and the hormone balance ensued. It was a 15 kilo for Americans, that there would be like over 30 pounds of weight gain like that overnight, to where people looked at me and said, and here in Asia, oh, Nikki, what happened? What happened to you? And I felt completely unlike myself. I mean, Luke, you probably remember, we've been friends for a long time and known each other a long time when that first happened. And I didn't know what was going on in my body, and I couldn't understand why all of a sudden, my body just revolted. And again, that had a lot to do with stress. But what happened was I figured out that I was dealing with adrenal fatigue. And what that means is that when you have stress, okay, so we have to go back to the hormone involved, cortisol. Cortisol should peak in the morning and should come down so that we can go to sleep at night, right? So throughout the day. But what happens is when you're having stress and you're making cortisol all day long, and cortisol is made from the adrenal glands. And after a while, your body gets tired of that dance. And so after a while, the adrenal glands can't keep up. We call the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, can become altered from that constant being on, that constant kind of fight or flight mode in the body, and it becomes tired. And when you reach that point of adrenal fatigue, fasting is probably going to create more stress for your body. And this is a time that you need to kind of reset and rebalance your body and nourish properly. And nourish in every sense of the world. I mean, really, like eat regularly. The body loves consistency. So when you're restricting and then eating and then restricting and eating, your body's like, what's going on? And the next time that you do it, it might just store. This happened to me. I would fast during adrenal fatigue. But I just want to get rid of this 30 pounds. And I was in this desperate mode to get rid of this weight. And I would fast. I remember I did a 10-day fast and I lost 1 pound. And when I started to eat again after the fast, because let's face it, we can't stay fasting. And you feel great, and I would love to do it. And I love fasting. Like I said, there's a lot of great benefits to fasting and to detoxification that comes with that, if you want to call it that, or avoiding toxins, I would say, because again, detox is just happening in our body. It's not like we're really doing it. It's just, you're avoiding those things. But when you are in this mode of restricting for so long, the body will go into storage mode. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen next, so I'm just going to hang on. And so I had to learn very quickly that restriction and anything extreme was not going to work anymore. and this was a big lesson for me. And I would love to help people understand a little bit better about restrictive types of diets and when fasting can be maybe not the most beneficial thing for you. So if you're somebody that's been restricting for a long time, I would say it's time to nourish. It's time to bring a regular routine back to the body. If you've been maybe under eating and under exercising, let's bring exercise, and fitness into the equation here too, because that's something that's really important. I remember there was a time that I thought, well, I don't even really need to exercise. I can just fast and I don't really need to exercise. Like, I can just lose these 5 pounds, these 10 pounds. So your metabolic requirement just goes to a screeching halt, right? You're not really burning anything. I burnt through all my muscle. I was like just bones. And so there's no muscle on the body. And so you don't really need that much calories. So when you start to maybe overdo it, and you're gonna get hungry again, and you're gonna eat, and you need to eat, your body needs that to survive, right? So when you start to do it, your body will start holding on and holding on. And it's not maybe that nice in the beginning when you do start to nourish again, because it comes maybe in the way you feel, especially with the hormone imbalance that ensues. There was a point where I completely lost my menstrual cycle through that process as well, because I didn't have enough estrogen, didn't have enough progesterone, right? And my testosterone was in the toilet. So I had to completely go on to hormone replacement to allow the organs to rest, especially as it came to stress, and really start to nourish and rebuild from there. And now I look back, I'm grateful for this experience because I didn't understand it before. And I think a lot of times it goes overlooked when you maybe go to the doctor and you're not really honest about your history and some of the choices that you made, or sometimes even you're eating and you have a hormone imbalance, and that can come from so many reasons. It's not just from restricting. Maybe it's from not sleeping enough, or you've just been ruminating over something, or stress. Our body doesn't know the difference between the type of stress that we're getting. It can be inflammatory foods, fried foods, and maybe more toxins in the body. These are all creating stress, but definitely like the type of stress that you're just not liking what is. You're ruminating, or maybe that's messing with your sleep. This type of stuff can throw you off balance. It can wreak havoc on your thyroid and your sex hormones. Men too, right? I see this in men quite a bit, or overtraining. Overtraining is another reason where you can have some alteration in the hormone balance as well. So these are all examples of how we can get thrown off. Now, detox in some form can be very beneficial in helping you to get back on track. Because if you've been maybe not making the best choices about your foods, or your digestion is off or something like that, then some level of detox might be beneficial. I know this can sound a little bit confusing because it's like, well, which one is it? Isn't there just one way? But it's not. There's not just one way. There's so many different ways to detoxify. Number one, avoiding the toxins, being aware where you're getting them from. That's the best. That is like the best thing for detox, is just trying to avoid them. And sleeping, of course, nourishing yourself, and then exercising. So to get back on track, I had to learn very quickly how to nourish my body properly, get enough rest, definitely deal with the stress. We don't know when stress is going to come. The one thing that I have to say that was probably really beneficial throughout this process was that I kept a plant-based lifestyle. I've been plant-based for 13 years now, and I think probably that was the thing that saved me from tipping the bucket. And I'm usually a good sleeper. I sleep pretty well too, so that was probably another good beneficial thing, was getting good rest. But in some cases, when someone has such an extreme imbalance in the body, remember, it's not just our hormone system, but our immune system comes into play here, and so in some cases, that stress can tip the bucket and can become some type of disease. Whether that's maybe like so much inflammation in the body becomes maybe like an autoimmune condition or inflammatory condition like arthritis or something, or maybe cancer, right? There's so many different types of things that can kind of come up And again, listening to those symptoms over the way, sometimes these are our early things, because if I look back, there was definitely early things. My digestion was terrible because I was eating and not eating and eating and not getting enough fibers, and only drinking juices and this type of thing. So there's, not to mention like the production of neurotransmitters that comes from the gut. So the mood was all over the place. And that can come along with hormones and stuff too. But there's so many things that can kind of go wrong if you're not doing it right with your health. And when I say right, I mean doing it to really understanding, where are you at right now? Where do you want to be? And getting help to get there. Because I also played, Dr. Nikki, and was, or Google doctor, Googling everything, looking it up, and that'll freak you out. So we have to be advocates for our own health, but understand that we need help. And I had to surrender and not try to figure it all out by myself, but hand it over to some amazing experts that in the field of nutrition, in the field of, even someone like Luke, being there for me, just to someone to talk to, someone to help with maybe that emotional component, and then of course, figuring it out with fitness. When you have adrenal fatigue, or when you've had stress for a long time, maybe the intense weight training that I was doing set me back. Maybe that took me an extra year to get back, because I maybe could have been doing things like yoga, for example, more meditative practices, breathing techniques, and maybe some lightweight training, but I really got into it. And eventually it settled out and I got balanced, but getting some guidance there could have maybe helped me a little bit along the way too.
I remember hearing this from a coach. Stop forcing your body. If not, it will react. Instead, coax it and it will respond. So really be kind and really start listening to your body and reach out for help if you do need it, and be honest, fully honest with yourself. What would you say to those that have resonated with your story and have just been kind of forcing themselves into this mold, or forcing themselves into fasting and counting calories? What would you say to them as some lasting words of inspiration to them?
Yeah, I think just exactly what you said, just be gentle with yourself. Uh, we're human, we make mistakes. We're learning, we're learning along with each other. Boy, we're learning a lot this year, aren't we? I think how many of us have experienced some stress this year. This has been a tremendous year for a lot of people, and a lot of change. And so probably, if you've been dealing with stress and in life in general, maybe you've had a long period of stress, be gentle with yourself. Honor the way that you're feeling, in this moment. Maybe you're not at your best. Maybe you spent, those time during lockdown overeating and under exercising or something like that. But the most important thing that I can share is that our body is this incredible healing machine. We are constantly detoxifying, like I said. So we can just support our body, support our well-being, our mindset, support each other, to get back to balance. And when you give yourself the right conditions, know where you're at, in that moment. Be honest with yourself, like you said, about maybe some of the things that could be contributing to maybe the imbalances that you're feeling, or the symptoms that you're feeling, and know where you're at in this moment and where you want to be. It'll happen. You'll get there. I always say, how you look, if it's like you want to look great, this is a side effect of health. So when you put health as your first goal, I want to be healthy, you'll look good. You'll feel good. You'll radiate. You'll glow. All these things will come. I think this is incredibly important. I try to impress this on my teenager. I have a 13-year-old, that don't compare yourself to other people. We're also different. Just be the best version of yourself, and be your own advocate. Look after your health first, and your body will just adjust. And just if you make all those efforts and something's not budging, and you're just at that place where you're feeling stuck, like, oh, I'm not getting results, and I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm eating right and I'm sleeping, and I hear this quite a bit. Go get checked, because it's sometimes things out of our control can throw us out of whack, with our hormones and maybe with our neurotransmitter production, maybe our moods aren't great, and there's so much that you can do. Maybe it doesn't take one thing, but all that combination that can help you to get back on track.
I love it, Nikki. Thank you very much for all that you've shared.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. A wise man once said, "You make a new life by making new choices." Now, if you know that what you eat matters, if you know that health comes from healthy living, then the time to make new choices is now. And just imagine owning the summit for life. Click the button for more. Maybe you know our stories. Luke and I lost family to cancer, and we wish we would have known sooner what you are learning here today. So please, share the summit, take action, and let's support each other. Thank you. This is Toby and Luke signing off, and we can't wait to see you for the next presentation.